So we're starting with Libra today. So the way that I'm just going to go about this for the rest of this class for the zodiac signs is we're going to be talking about the rest of the signs in terms of not light and dark, like literally like light and dark for the seasons in tropical astrology, but we're just going to be talking about it in terms of more the key components of each sign, like is it Venus ruled, is it cardinal, mutable, fixed, and then we're going to be pulling traits from those so that we can get a better understanding of the signs that we're talking about. So we're going to start with Libra. So Libra is, of course, the scales. Libra is a Venus ruled sign. So what we know about Venus automatically is Venus is the planet of partnerships. It's a planet of harmony as well as self-esteem, respect, things that we value. And so Libra is going to have some of those key components. Now, the question is, what is it valuing? What is it trying to create harmony in? Because we find that answer in the element of that Libra, or the sign, or the element. I was trying to come up with like a good way to construct that sentence. So it's an air sign. So what do we know about air? Air, it's connective. It is about being more intellectual. It's about conversation. It's about making decisions. So we can, if we put that together with Venus by itself, Venus in a very air-like sign is saying it values social interaction. It values the back and forth of ideas between two people. It likes to pass things back and forth through communication and ideas. It's going to be a sign that can be, because it is Venus ruled, it can be very charismatic as well. And that can be a way that it attracts social interaction or attracts others through being charismatic or just being aesthetically pleasing. And of course we can apply that to like people as well, but also think about like some of the things that you see during Libra season. Usually you see like, everybody's getting super cute. I love this like time of year in particular because it's such a Libra thing. During the Libra season, we usually hear people talking about pumpkin spice lattes, and everybody has their cute like fall outfits on and everything, like taking pictures, getting together, because we're getting into like maybe like some of the colder months as well. And so people are starting to, it's kind of like that beginning of like together time, but like holiday time too, which I think is also very Libra, because Libra is about partnerships. It's about other things as well, but a big part of Libra is about partnerships. What do you learn about yourself through your relationships with other people? And so I always like to think of that time of year, because it is such a very Libra thing. It's about like fashion or like taking pictures. It's about like I guess like some of the more surface level things. However, I hesitate to say surface level because Libra is so much deeper than that. I do believe we're going to cover exaltations, debilitations, and all that good stuff today. I think we should be able to get to that today. But I'm going to like do a little spoiler here. So not only is Libra the scales, because it's about relationships and what does this person have to say versus this person have to say, but it's also weighing what really matters versus what doesn't matter, what's superficial versus what actually means something. And so keep that in mind with Libra, is always weighing something, but that in particular is really important because Saturn is exalted in Libra. And exalted just means it does really well there. And so if everyone could make sure that they are muted, that'd be great. But yeah, so especially since Saturn is exalted in Libra, you can think of some very Saturn-like things being Libra things. So Libra isn't just about like the light, airy stuff. It's also about what actually is built to last and to stay, what has staying power, what has a key foundation, or like, you know, a strong foundation for it to last the test of time, um, and what's actually important versus what's not. So we can get some really interesting traits from Libra just based on that, like tact. Tact is more of like a Saturn thing, even though we can see it being an air thing as well, since it is about like strategizing and thinking through things, thinking through what is most efficient. I do have to apologize about the odd spacing on this handout in particular. I'm not sure what happened with formatting there when I was typing it, but it's about integrating new people's like either perspectives or integrating new components of either ideas or like it's like very much that Venus thing, like bringing in new things to add to other things to make things maybe more efficient or to work better, or to just see a new perspective on things, to be able to create some sort of new result as well. It's charming, fair. Those are all Venus things. Indecisive is more of like, I think, an air thing, but it can also just be a Libra thing because it's about like weighing the pros and cons. I think one thing that we haven't really talked about is the mode also of Libra. Libra is a cardinal sign. And so it's not only marking the fall equinox, but it's also a hard pivot. So we talked a little bit, I think, about this last month, is that Libra is kind of like that halfway point in the year. And so it's like, okay, what have you been doing for the past, like the other half of the year, or for the first half of the year, since Aries season? Now it's time to kind of judge the work that's been done, because we've been kind of seeing a kind of buildup almost since Leo season. We could even say, I guess, no, we'll say Leo season, because we started talking about a bit how Leo is more about responsibility, and then we get the sign after Leo, which is Virgo, and Virgo's taking both from Libra and Leo. And so it's more so talking about, okay, what have you built as well? I just want to make sure, because my microphone doesn't look like it's moving at all. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because like the little like thing on my on the speaker wasn't actually going up anywhere, so I just wanted to make sure that that you guys could actually hear me. Perfect. Okay, so we see cardinal as being more action oriented. It's not only says, okay, we need to act on this, but it says, okay, well, we need to do this right now. So it's a bit more about initiative, but we could also see it as impulsive as well, or just wanting to just take some sort of action. But since it's air, it's not so much about action by itself. It's also about thinking about the action. So Libra, when we talked about air in, I think, the first class, we talked about how air is on its own fickle. You can't really guide the air to go anywhere. It's going to do its own thing. And so think about a cardinal air sign is going to want to do a whole lot of actions in a lot of different directions. It could change at any moment. So it's a bit unpredictable. And so it can be like, we could see this in maybe like somebody that has a lot of Libra in their chart, or maybe during Libra season, someone's like, I had this great idea that maybe came through like bouncing ideas off of a friend, that they're like, oh, I got inspired by this person, which is very Libra since it's a relationship, and now I wanted to go do this thing. This seems really pleasing to my mind, and I think it sounds good, so I'm going to go do it. That's a very Libra thing. However, what's also a very Libra thing is to say, okay, maybe like midway through the action, or even before like having the inspiration, but like stopping before you actually act and saying, okay, maybe these are the pros and cons, and so I'm going to wait. I am going to act on this, but I want to make sure I understand all of the pros and cons of this decision before I actually make some sort of action. And so I think those are like the two sides of Libra. It can be a bit erratic or unpredictable, but the other side can be just indecisive because it's really just sitting with its decision before it does anything. So that's like, I guess, like the best way that Libra with the cardinal modality can be expressed, and then maybe like the worst way that it can be expressed. Because then it kind of creates chaos or just a mess in general. But I think a good way also to think about Libra is, I think when you look at, and I will say, like, I won't ignore some of the stereotypes that are brought up about the signs, but, and this is like, I'm saying this because I'm gonna bring up one right now. So on, like, whenever you see like what is that, like TikToks or whatever, and they're talking about Libras, a big stereotype about Libra is that like it's like this kind of bimbo like character, and I would say that is I mean, I guess I could see where the stereotype comes from, but I think that couldn't be further from the truth with Libra people, at least from what I've experienced and what I've seen. And I'm sure like lots of Libras would also agree. But I think Libra would prefer maybe to stay on the lighter side of things. However, I think Libra, because we have to remember that it's also the opposite of Aries. And so opposite doesn't necessarily mean it does like the complete opposite. It just means it does the same thing in a different way. So Aries is very aggressive, where Libra says, well, we should do that exact same thing, but I'm going to maybe be more opportunistic. I'm going to, partner with other people to get the same thing done. I would, it's like kind of like you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar, where Aries might say like, let's just put out like lots of like cups of vinegar or whatever to get the same thing done. Libra might say like, let's just, really incorporate everybody's ideas. While that might create more chaos because now everybody has to say, I think in Libra's mind, it's making everybody feel important. It's making sure everyone feels heard and making sure that the best outcome can be decided on, because now you have lots of different perspectives. And so it's like Libra is a softer kind of, I don't want to say like rulership, because I mean, it is. I'm like, it's like if Aries is ruling with an iron fist, Libra rules with an iron fist with like a velvet glove on it. It's like the same thing. It's still very sharp, and it has its mindset on the goal at hand, and that will be done because Libra is still very much about judgment. But it's going to do it in a bit of a softer way, but it's still very sharp, to the point, very like Queen of Swords kind of energy, if I had to describe it. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Sarah. I like that. Libras are much more diplomatic. But of course, it's like the goal between Aries and Libra can be the same. It's just expressed differently. So we have for the body rulership of Libra, we have the lower back, the lumbar region, the kidneys, and the appendix are all going to be ruled by Libra. So lumbar region is basically, it's just the lower back. I think it also includes, I want to say it also includes like the obliques, I think, as well. which and I think like one other thing, but I can't remember right now. But it's like basically like that whole lower back area. And so we are moving on to Scorpio. So it's easy to see where we start off with Libra. That's kind of about judgment. We kind of continue that in Scorpio, since Scorpio is a fixed sign, but it's also Mars ruled. Scorpio is also a water sign. And so it's about what is underneath the surface. It's so Mars is about like cutting through things, but in a water sign, Mars is going to act out that watery kind of modal or like element in a way where it's like, I want to see into the unseen. I want to go deeper. I want to go to the bottom of the ocean kind of thing. Whereas in Aries, we see Mars express itself very different. It says, I want to just cut things, like conquer this thing, let's go on to the next. Scorpio will take its time to look deeper into things. So we see the judgment from Libra being passed on to Scorpio, where we can see things of like the 8th house, very reminiscent of the 8th house, which is where we see punishment. And some of the darker themes that you see in astrology usually come from Scorpio, the 8th house, or Pluto. But you also see like things like imprisonment come in with Scorpio as well, or with the 8th house. But we can see remnants of the 8th house coming in Scorpio. Because Scorpio is going to be in some ways about that isolation as well. And of course, like, I don't want to make, Scorpio sound like, just like a god awful sign, because it's not. But we do see some of like the darker things when we talk about Scorpio, and that is partially due to Scorpio's co-ruler Pluto being in the mix. But of course, Mars is going to be a malefic as well, and so malefic planets, as we know, aren't going to be the funnest planets, but they're super important. So some of the good things that can come from that Mars water kind of dynamic can be that we see a lot of like defense come up. So like when we were talking about Pluto, we were talking about the immune system functions all come from Pluto. We see that in Scorpio as well. So like the best part of this trait could be like defense, protecting yourself from something that could be harmful. The other side of that could be paranoia that comes up in Scorpio as well. But we could see like cutting through like the BS of a situation. So, really feeling into or being very tapped into the truth of a matter, which we can also see as remnants of Libra, because Libra can be about like, what is the truth? And Scorpio is really looking to find the why of it all, or to actually find the truth. We don't really get into the why until we probably get to Sagittarius. But Scorpio wants to know the truth. So it's kind of like the judge and the executioner kind of dynamic with Libra and Scorpio, kind of being a continuation on each other, or a Scorpio being a continuation of Libra. It's a fixed sign. And so fixed water, I think like the first kind of visual I get is going to be the like visual of like ice. So fixed water is like kind of like, to me, like ice. It's something that or like an iceberg. It's hard to know exactly all the things that are inside of that iceberg. Or we can even look at it like, I think I was talking about this maybe in the first class or one of these classes where we were talking about psychology, and that diagram of the iceberg, like what's on the tip of the iceberg versus the bottom base of that iceberg as well. So we can see, not just things being hidden with Scorpio, or like some sort of like repression of, or like hiding secrets, or like repressing emotions, but we can also see maybe like just some deeper emotions coming in as well, more intense emotions. And maybe just not being super willing to share those emotions with other people, being more reflective or introspective coming in with Scorpio. I was going to say something else, but I lost my train of thought on it. But yeah, we have it being a fixed sign, so it's also determined, persistent, but it can also be very sensual as well. Secretive, intense, emotional, and then we already talked about paranoia. It's really interesting. Have had a lot of clients that are Scorpios, and I do think this is, just like a nice example to bring up that I've seen, is that I've gotten a lot of clients that are Scorpios that they're in some sort of like defense like job, so like police officers or like security personnel, military people. I've gotten a lot of I've seen a lot of like Scorpios in those jobs, but it makes sense that that would be the case, knowing what we know about Scorpio and like the components that make it Scorpio. I want to also apologize. It says for the element for Scorpio, it says Earth. Again, I don't know why it says that. I apologize. Just scratch that out and put water. That was a typo on my part. Oh, I want to also bring up, so I put on here, Scorpions are nocturnal. They're awake or most active at night. This speaks to their mystery and their Plutonian nature. Scorpions are also ambush predators. They'll wait in a hiding spot for the right time to strike. We can attribute this to the trait of Scorpio as well. It's all about timing. I've seen a lot of things happen in Scorpio season where it's all about timing to expose things. I'm trying to think, I think it was like an early, this had to be in like, whenever there was, what's that guy, Epstein, all of that, all of that exposure happened during a Mercury retrograde in Scorpio about a sex crime. And of course, like we have a Venus retrograde that also happened, I think, around that same time, that a lot of that got exposed. But I think it's also a good thing to point out, not just like in transits, how Scorpio can show up during the season, but also how we can see some of that trait of like wanting to uncover something that's unsafe, that's unsavory, some sort of crime, can also be attributed to Scorpio as well, because it's not just about hiding things, but it's also about digging up things that we maybe want to keep hidden, or that someone would want to keep hidden, like a crime. We can also see that for the rulership, I think everybody knows the stereotype of like Scorpio is like linked to sex and the genitalia as well. So we have body rulership being the genitalia, but also the colon as well. Yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to say about Scorpio. We're going to move on to Sagittarius. So Sagittarius is the mutable fire sign that's ruled by Jupiter. So Jupiter is going to be about big ideas. It's going to be about philosophy. When you think centaur, and if anybody is interested in mythology, you know that centaurs were not just the scholars, but they were also warriors as well. So it's kind of like this, just like centaurs themselves, there's this duality that's happening. There's kind of like this hedonistic, kind of like rowdy, violent behavior coupled with this more like professor, and just very like scholarly mind that comes with Sagittarius. They can do both. It is a masculine sign. I haven't really been talking too much about masculine or feminine, but we already know that it's a masculine sign. It's also a fire sign as well. So it can be not just seen as a mix between Scorpio and Capricorn, um, but we can look at it as also searching for truth. Fire illuminates things. And so where we see the darkness in Scorpio, we see the light in Sagittarius. So that's why we see with Sagittarius, a lot of times a Sagittarius season in general, or the archetype of Sagittarius is some sort of liberation or freedom. Um, Anybody that has Sagittarius in their chart knows that freedom is like one of the biggest things that Sagittarians or that's talked about when we talk about Sagittarius season or somebody with Sagittarius placements. Freedom is a huge thing. They do not want to be tied down. They want to go explore the world or free to explore like a library or whatever books they want to study or whatever. They want to expand, not be confined. And so we can see that during the season, but also in a chart as well. There's a big thing about expansion and freedom to find some sort of truth. This is a stark difference to the opposite sign of Gemini. Gemini also wants to know the truth, but it's not super committed maybe to knowing the full truth of a situation. It wants to talk about it. So Gemini is going to be like a conversation. And so we could say like Gemini, as far as finding the truth of things, it's going to be the conversation. It's like a quick conversation. So it's like, oh yeah, like I'm using an example, but it's saying maybe like you have a conversation with a classmate and you're like, okay, X plus Y is Z. Great. And Gemini will maybe just leave it there. That's the answer. Cool. Sagittarius is going to say, okay, but why is Z the answer? How did you get there? So that's the main difference between those two opposite signs. And so they're looking for the same thing, but they just do it in two very different ways. But we also can see this expansion coming from the fact not only that it's about being a fire sign, but also because Jupiter is its ruling planet, because Jupiter is a planet of philosophy, expansion, and higher knowledge as well. But it's also the lucky planet. And so we can see like allies coming in, or like friends in high places coming in when we talk about like Jupiter as a planet in expressing itself through Sagittarius. And so a lot of times you can see Sagittarius season being a lot about maybe what are your plans for progressing in like some sort of venture that you're trying to go into. I'm trying to think also what is happening during Sagittarius season. So Sagittarius season is like November. It's not surprising that we see like voting happening during Sagittarius season. This is another instance where we're looking more so at Jupiter, because Jupiter is law, but also the ninth house is law. And we can see some of that trickle down into Sagittarius. It's not the exact same thing. So whenever you think of Sagittarius, I wouldn't say always think of law or like the legal system or politics, but I would say like it's more of a Jupiter thing. And because Jupiter rules over Sagittarius, then it has some connections, like law and Sagittarius have some connections. And so we have like voting for like the presidential candidates or local politicians usually happens like around November-ish, the end of November, and it's at the end of the year. But we're also suiting up for Christmas during Sagittarius season as well, which is another side of Jupiter. When we were talking about Jupiter initially, I used the metaphor of like being at Christmas dinner, and how Jupiter is just kind of like the eating, drinking, being in a good mood. It's like very like Santa Claus, like Jupiter. And we can see a lot of that coming through in Sagittarius. It's about having a good time, being active, and wanting to get things moving. Yeah, it can be about wanting to have exciting conversations, being boisterous, being loud, but it's not trying to look too closely into like getting into like heated, or like it's not trying to be argumentative. It's looking for maybe like the just kind of like the truth of the situation without having to have like that uh, like debate of it all. Not saying it will shy away from it, but it's not really looking, because it's Jupiter, not Mercury, it's not looking to be like too contrary to other people. Anyone that knows this Sagittarius knows that, yeah, they make their opinions known, but they're not really going to, if you have a different opinion, they'll be happy to agree to disagree with you and just keep it pushing. And so we have for body rulership for Sagittarius, we have the hips and the thighs, but also we see for traits, adventurous, spiritual. Jupiter is also the planet of belief, not just law and legal systems, but it's also going to be, Jupiter can also be the planet of like pregnancy as well. And so that's another way we can think about like expansion, like with the body. And so when you're looking at a chart, especially like if someone has like a Sagittarius rising, there is something big about their form, whether it's they have really thick hair, they have really big just features, or they might be somebody that manages, maybe like yo-yos with weight quite a bit, because Jupiter is ruling their first house. So their body expands very easily. And that can be like a good thing. I'm not, knocking it. I too am a plus size person, but they are very statuesque people usually. I still haven't met any Sagittarius risings that aren't at least curvy, at the very least. They're in constant pursuit of greater freedom. They're generous, honest, optimistic, scholarly. Jupiter is all about optimism. Always wants to find the bright side of the situation. We have like the mythology of Chiron. I was actually just talking to somebody about Chiron and the chaos that it brings when it's triggered in a transit or through a natal chart. And I think I have a whole class devoted to the asteroids. I want to also bring in like the 6 stars as well, because I think those are really interesting. At least they interest me. And so I'll need to draw up maybe another handout for the stars. But Chiron, of course, is going to be the centaur that we usually see in the pictograph of Sagittarius. So it's like this scholar kind of archetype that is constantly looking to rise above some sort of wound, whether it be internal or external. So then we move on to Capricorn, which is going to be the next cardinal sign. This is an earth sign that's ruled by Saturn. Before I go on to Capricorn, does anybody have any questions about the past 3 signs that we've done from Libra to Sagittarius? Because we're getting into the last 3 signs of the Zodiac. Okay. So we have Capricorn, the sea goat. I will not bore you with with the absolute fever dream that is, and I think there are actually multiple tellings of like the myth of Capricorn and where that came from, but there is one telling of the, I guess, origin story of like how it got into the stars, or like, how that came to be. But there's one telling of the story that basically has to do with like a bunch of sea goats that go on land, and then like one of them was like super lonely, and so to be saved from its own loneliness, basically the gods put it in the stars. It's an interesting, it's an interesting story for sure. I was reading through it and I was like, what am I reading? But anyway, so it's an earth sign, so it's going to be a bit more cautious, conservative, especially since it's Saturn ruled. It's about limitation. Earth by itself can already be very like restrictive. It's not really moving too quickly. Saturn isn't moving too quickly either. And so Saturn is also the planet that represents time. And so a lot of Capricorn people and even Capricorn risings, it's all about timing or it's all about age. The older you get, usually with Capricorn placements, the better things become. A lot of Capricorn placements or Capricorn risings, moon, sun people are late bloomers because of the Saturn aspect. And I imagine it only kind of gets more emphasized the more placements you have in Capricorn. But we see with Saturn being the ruler of this earth sign, it can be very creative, especially because it's a cardinal earth sign. So it's not only more materialistic because of the earth aspect, but it's also going to be very determined to not just climb because of the whole like goat thing, but it's going to be very determined to get the security that it needs through like material things. So you can see a great work ethic with Capricorn people, or just wanting to rise to the top of things. Like I said, because of the whole goat vision that is made by the sea goat. But I do want to talk about the sea goat aspect because, of course, the way that I look at it, at least, and this is, I'm sure it's written in a book somewhere, but this is how I look at it. So I can't, be the only person that's thought like this. So it's like Capricorn is almost like half Pisces, but also it's half Earth as well. So there's this dreaminess that's almost like it's literally at the bottom of Capricorn. There's this dreaminess that I think pushes the goat part of Capricorn up and forward. But it's like this, just like Sagittarius, it's like this duality between super dreamy, emotional, and very mystical versus restrictive, pessimistic, and just kind of stoic and just like really really hanging on to like the material part of the world. And I think obviously that could work very well together. It just really depends on the Capricorn person, but I think we also see quite a bit of this when we're going through Capricorn season. This is Christmas time, or like when everybody is making their New Year's resolutions. I don't think or I don't know. I don't really make New Year's resolutions myself anymore, but I know that as someone that really loves to go to the gym, there is no more of a delusional time than New Year's resolutions between like January and March, where you see people very motivated to get into the gym that they've been paying for, that they haven't gone to in like how many months, but they have these big goals and they're determined to get there, and some of them are literally climbing to goal. But there can be there might not be like a lot of planning or thought behind the amount of work that comes with that. And you actually do see this in Capricorn people quite a lot. They'll take on big tasks and have the best intentions of following through, but it might take forever until we see, and like what I was saying with Capricorn, it's a lot about time and age and discipline as well because of Saturn. A lot of Capricorns, if they haven't matured, then you'll see, I guess, like the worst part of that cardinal Earth come into play, where it's just like, well, I worked at this, so it's not working in the time frame that I want it to. So I'll come back to it later. Because I think, and I say that because I'm like, I think the stereotype with Capricorn is that they're automatically these CEOs and bosses. Most of the Capricorns that I've met do get there, of course, but they're a hot mess first. Like, and this is myself included, I'm a Capricorn rising. But we see like this ambitious, practical and mystical aspect of Capricorn, but it's also going to be Saturn ruled, so it can be about status. What do other people think about me? When we were talking about Saturn, we were talking about the regard of other people, but Saturn is also authority, and so that's where we get like some of that ambition or wanting to be a leader, especially when it comes to creating some sort of security for other people, or at a place where we do gain material things like at work. So we can see Capricorn people or people with Capricorn placements being very much about work and not so much about the home life as we see in its opposite sign, Cancer. So Capricorn, it can be a lot about being out in the world, where Cancer is very much about being at home. Or it's more focused on career, or like, what do other people think of the persona that I'm creating, that I've created, rather than who I actually am at home. That could be, I guess, another way you can look at it. Disciplined or being self-disciplined is another we can see with Capricorn. You can see this like through like the whole restriction thing. But we can see also, I'm trying to think of like some other things that we were talking about with Saturn that we see quite a bit, because I know that Capricorns do have like that stereotype about being stoic. And I think like even better, like if you wanted to like make a funny video, like kind of roasting Capricorns, I think stoicism is kind of like the tip of the iceberg, because we have to remember that Saturn is also about, it's about what do other people think of me because I've created this persona, but with all of that comes like some insecurity as well. And so while I think there is like this persona, a lot of Capricorns do really care what other people think of them, in that way through the stoicism that Saturn creates. But yeah, very determined, creative people, even though they might not show it automatically. But also think of like, again, like around Christmas time, everybody's stressed out at work. And finances, I think like fiscal years are getting ready to end, or maybe that's April, I can't remember. I don't do finance, but we can see with body rulership, for Capricorn, it's going to be the skeleton, teeth, knees, and the skin. So kind of going back to, again, like the Saturn aspect. So it's all the things that you kind of need that are important. I mean, like your knees are important, obviously, skin's important, teeth are important, skeleton's definitely important. But it's about structure. What have you built over a long period of time? It's long-term success with Capricorn, not what is right now, which when we do talk about aspects, I think today, we'll get into what is like a square. And that's what actually sets like the tone with the square between Aries and Capricorn. Aries is all about, I want it right now. And Capricorn is like, okay, I have to wait. So moving on, we have Aquarius, the water bearer. Again, sorry for the spacing. It's an air sign that is ruled by Uranus, but I put Uranus there because I just didn't want to put Saturn there a second time. But it is, Saturn is going to be the traditional ruler, where Uranus is going to be the modern ruler, or the modern co-ruler. And I think I had someone ask, maybe not last class, but maybe it was a class that I taught last year, because I was like, I think a lot of people, when they think about Capricorn and Aquarius being ruled by the same planet, they're like, how? Well, we're going to talk about how, because I'm like, it actually makes sense when you think about it. So because we're talking about that, let's talk about the Saturn aspect first. Sure, Aquarius is known for being quirky, unique, progressive, different, chaotic, all those things. But we also have to think about, where could that come from? If Saturn is all about tradition, foundation, structure, and doing things over time, but you have a sign like Aquarius where it can be very much all over the place, creating chaos in everywhere it goes and just leaving a mess in its wake. Um, Aquarius is about the future, where Saturn might be very much, this is what I'm doing right now, and this is what has been tested and always has been done. We also have to remember that Capricorn is an earth sign, and so it's going to emphasize the Saturn part a bit more. But air is not as restrictive as earth is. It's everywhere all at the same time. But the Saturn aspect is kind of like, I'd like to think of it kind of as like a jumping board for Aquarius, because in order for any kind of progress to happen, you have to have a baseline first. So I say that Saturn, you can see kind of like the relationship between Saturn and Aquarius as Capricorn, or Saturn being the ruler of Capricorn, is kind of like tradition, and this is what we've always done, so let's stick with that. And Aquarius is saying, okay, I'm not knocking that. Yes, let's keep the idea of tradition, but this is where we could be going if we tweaked a couple things. I also want to point out that with Aquarius, because I think a lot of times the stereotype again with Aquarius is that it's like this very forward, progressive thinker. That's not always the case. Aquarius can be very, it can be conservative as well. It's like, it's just thinking of the future. So you can bring actually bring aspects of the past into the future if you think that it creates that ideal future in your mind, whatever that is. Like, you know, some people think that, I don't know, that I'm struggling to come up with like a example right now. Let's say that like someone that had Aquarius placements, they could think, oh yeah, I think that certain people shouldn't be able to vote anymore because that was like the best way to that was the best way to live. That is an Aquarius kind of thought. It's negative, very negative, but it would be because it has the future in mind, and it's tweaking it from how it is right now. It's tweaking a certain aspect of where we're at right now to put into the future. So it's progressive while still being regressive. The only difference is Aquarius is about the idealization of the future. What would be the perfect future? And the perfect future doesn't look the same to everybody. But ironically, Aquarius is a sign that's all about everyone. It's very collective. And so it says what is best for everybody. But it's also very much about what is best for me, because it's about being unique. And I've always said that Aquarius, I think Aquarius is like a walking, talking, like contradiction. And maybe it's like the Uranus part of it. But it does have these, because and I do apologize, I'm like going on a lot of tangents right now, but I think they're all kind of staying within Aquarius because we're talking about it. But the myth behind Aquarius is literally that Zeus saw a young man that he thought was beautiful, so he brought him up to Olympus to be his cupbearer. Okay, in that aspect, it set that young man apart. I'm not going to try and pronounce his name or even remember it because it was a long name that was really hard to pronounce, but it set that young man apart as being special. However, and that, obviously that I'm sure that was like a positive thing, but it also, again, in that same instant, it set it apart. It alienated that young man from the rest of humanity. And so while there's this very positive thing of like, yeah, I'm different, I'm special, the double-edged sword is like my differences and um my uniqueness set me apart from the group. But I long to be a part of the group as well. And so like we have the conflict between the ideas of the individual versus what it would be good for everybody. Or taking into account what would be best for everyone through the viewpoint of the individual. Um, and so we kind of coming back from that story also, because we're talking about being a visionary, something that is not tangible, maybe in the here and now. We can attribute that also to the element of air, because it's thinking, it's trying to create something that isn't tangible yet. It's an idea, it's a thought. Because we have Saturn and Uranus, especially Uranus being the higher octave of Mercury, Aquarius is also usually very technical, or very like, we see Aquarius being more tapped in with like science and mathematics and things like that, because those are, I guess, like higher, like subjects that would be like the higher octave of Mercury, since Mercury is going to be numbers, but science is more of a Uranus thing. And so we see like with Aquarius, it being attributed to like the sciences or mathematics as well. Because Uranus is the co-ruler, we can see like some traits like being a bit more high strung, but also independence being really important. And we already kind of talked about the myth and how that might play into like traits that we see with Aquarius season, whether it be in a person or during themes that we see during a season, the season of Aquarius, but also being rebellious. Uranus is about literally overthrowing the patriarchy, or it's about overthrowing rulership, or anarchists are ruled by Uranus. Air creates like some sort of detachment or objectivity, inventive. We already talked about like how that, that visionary aspect might come up, and this is just kind of how it comes through in a trait. Intellectual, and then of course visionary. Another way you could look at this is like through myth, is like the connection between Babylon, the god Ea, and the destructive floods that would overflow. So if you ever Google Ea, he has this cup that he's always seen with, and it was said during Aquarius season, of course, that cup would overflow and create all these really destructive floods. So that's all I was talking about there. But then also, I think I know that the Tower card is not associated with Uranus, but I personally associate the Tower card more so with Uranus. I do believe, I guess, like in a book sense, the Tower card is associated with Mars, if I'm not mistaken. But to me, at least, this is a personal like thought, is that it seems more like Uranus because it's upheaval, and Uranus is upheaval. It is literally knocking you off of that Saturn foundation that you built. It's like the lightning bolt, which we literally see a lightning bolt in the Tower card. So it's shattering the foundation of things. And I think that, especially when you're looking at the Tower card, that's what's happening. Something that you built up and like over a certain amount of time, Saturn, is being knocked down by Uranus, like, or a very Uranus-like energy, so that you can reflect, rebuild, and have a new vision and rebuild something new. For body rulership for Aquarius, we have the circulatory system, the ankles, the shins, and the calves. Any questions about Aquarius before we move on to our last sign, Pisces? Okay. So we have Pisces the fish. It's going to be a mutable water sign that's ruled by Neptune. So with Pisces, um, it's going to take on the traits of Aquarius and Aries. So think about like all the enthusiasm of Aries, but all the chaos of Aquarius. You get Pisces. I think probably um that's like the best way that I like, or like, I'm sure there are other ways to see it as well, but I'm like, that's the first thing I think of when I think about how do you put together Aquarius and Aries and make them one sign, is I literally think of all the enthusiasm and that you get in Aries of like a new beginning, a new start, but you're not exactly there yet. And so all those like good feelings of a new beginning become daydreams because they're just visions that we get from Aquarius. So it's like that dream. So that creates the dreaminess of Pisces, but also Neptune creates the dreaminess of Pisces as well. um, but it's a mutable sign, so that's where we get Aries and Aquarius coming together. Um, but it's a water sign, so it's psychic, it's intuitive, it's going to be very comfortable with the emotional side of life as well. It's Jupiter ruled traditionally, though. Neptune is going to be the modern ruler, the modern co-ruler of Pisces. And so the modern co-ruler does play a part, but you could also see the same thing through Jupiter as well. We see the optimism coming through Pisces with Jupiter. We also see like some of the lucky aspects, or like the more beneficial like aspects of Jupiter coming through. But you can see like being like open-minded, or being very open to uh, different people or different ways of living, or just being purely focused on belief, comes through in Pisces as well, since Pisces is always already about like kind of the unseen. It says, I want to believe in the unseen. Um, it's also very creative, imaginative. Neptune creates all that creativity and imaginativeness and that dreaminess, but it also creates deception as well, whether that be deception because it's deceiving itself or deceiving other people. Martyrdom also comes from Neptune as well as escapism, hopefulness, and optimism. It really comes from Jupiter, to be honest. But um, we have the myth of Pisces also, or like the origin story, um, with Eros and Aphrodite jumping in and making themselves fish and tying themselves together so that they wouldn't lose each other. Very romantic kind of story, even. And I don't mean that like in like romance, but like it's like this very for lack of a better term, like very cute kind of story, which I on its own I think is very Pisces like as well, or just speaking to the heart of things, in an ideal sense. But also when we think about Aquarius, we were talking about idealizing the future. When we take that a step further into Pisces, we can get seeing things through rose-colored glasses, or some might see that as being delusional. Others might see it, or it can be acted out in its best way as just being optimistic, but also realizing that it might not happen. It really all depends on what is either happening in the sky at that same time, like during the season, depending on like what else is happening in the sky. Like say it's Pisces season right now, you could see a lot of people having these grandiose views of what is to come or what they want to create as far as dreams go, or people being a bit more mystical or being more interested in things like ghosts or like the paranormal, because that's also a very Pisces thing or concept. And but also realizing that those things aren't in this plane yet, or there is some sort of like wall, because Pisces can be just like literally dreams, things that are real but aren't in this plane yet, or that we haven't created physically yet. So you see a lot of that during Pisces season. But let's say it's Pisces season, but there's like a lot of planets in Taurus, which I think we actually just had, with Saturn being in Pisces, and we just got out of Taurus season. There was a pile up of planets in Taurus for a while. That was a great manifesting season. If we just had a whole bunch of planets in Pisces, it would be all dreams, possibly no building of anything. But say, with this past Taurus season, a lot of things are more likely to get done, because of the earth factor of Taurus. Taurus makes it possible to create those things in this 3D plane, where Pisces keeps it very ethereal, very mystical, in kind of like the astral plane or the dreamscape of things. Body rulership for Pisces is going to be the feet and the lymphatic system. Any questions about Pisces or the rest of the signs? Okay, I'm just going to switch over to another worksheet really quick. Give me 1 second. Okay, honey, you can go ahead and ask your question. You said you have a question, but not about the signs. You can go ahead and ask your question. If you want to come on the mic, you can, or if you want to type it in the chat box. Either one is fine.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I meant to ask this earlier, but I forgot. On the chart, like the birth chart, what does Lilith, Chiron, Fortune, Node, all that mean? Are we going to get into that? Or
for Lilith, like in Chiron, I have a whole worksheet on those. Part of Fortune, we can go over a little bit right now if you want. So let me actually pull up a chart so that everybody can see what you're talking about. 1 second.
If we're going to get to it, we don't have to talk about it right now. I was curious.
Oh no, yeah, well, like I'm like, if no one else has any objections, is that okay with everybody else if we like take a little detour? I love detours, so like it's no problem for me, but I want to make sure that everybody else is okay with it. Okay. All right, so we're gonna go on a little detour. So what Honey is talking about is the part of Fortune, and you've probably seen the part of Fortune before if you've looked up your birth chart. Let's see, let's go to astro theme, because that seems to be where I see it mentioned most often, or at least like shown. Some place, some websites don't show it. Okay, let me make this bigger. Okay, so let me just share this. Okay, so what what we're talking about, so this is just like the chart of today, like if a baby were born today, right now, this would be their chart. So what she's talking about, the part of fortune is this circle with an X in it. It always reminds me of X-Men. She's talking about this X right here. So the part of fortune is basically, like, I think in its like most basic terms, it's just a trigger point. So say you walked on the beach every day, every morning, or whatever, or yeah, let's say you walk on the beach every morning for your exercise, but during like whatever particular season, like the sun crosses over, or like let's say Mars, because I think that's a little bit more dramatic. Mars crosses over your part of fortune. And on this walk that you take every day on the beach, you trip on a rock, cut your foot open, you have to go to the hospital and get crutches, something like that. Okay, that's the part of fortune. It just means something happens, because what could also happen is that Venus could transit or touch on the part of fortune and you meet the love of your life. It's just a trigger point. It just means that something will happen. We do not know what will happen. Obviously, we can only read the general energy of the transit. But it's basically just a trigger point. So whenever a planet either transits or crosses over that point in your natal chart, something happens. And depending on how slow that planet moves will depend on how many like days, weeks, months you have of something going on. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Great. Okay. So we are going to, did I pull up the other one? I probably didn't pull that one because, okay. So we're going to start talking about sect in natal charts, which is not, it is it's a Hellenistic idea. You don't have to use it if you don't want to. I do suggest, you don't have to use it if you don't want to, because it does get complicated, but I think it's a good perspective to at least be familiar with. And I'm going to teach it anyway. So like, so basically we have sect and dignities. We're going to talk about sect first. So all sect is basically asking, does a person have a daytime chart or a nighttime chart? Obviously you would already know this if the person gave you their time of birth. But what's important about that is based on if someone has a daytime chart or a nighttime chart, that it puts a different emphasis on different planets in their chart and which ones are emphasized more. So we have in every natal chart, we have, of course, like this circle right here. So usually in a natal chart, of course, it's divided into 12 sections, or it's 12 houses, right? But we're taking all of that away just so that horizon line. So remember I was talking about that, I think like in the first couple classes, or whenever we talked about the houses, that was like the horizon line between like the 1st to the 7th house. Because that's literally where you get your rising sign from. And how you know if you have a day or a nighttime chart is because the sun passed over the horizon and therefore over some zodiac sign, and that's how you got your rising sign. So we have the horizon line that's going between the 1st and the 7th house, right across your birth chart. So if the sun is on the upper half, then you have a day chart. If the sun is in the lower half, then you were born at night and you have a nighttime chart. Now, what's important about this is let me scroll down here. Okay, So what's important here is the malefics and benefics that coincide with having a daytime chart or a nighttime chart. So if you have a daytime chart, you have one, or for whichever kind of chart you have one benefic and one malefic. So think about like, so if you have a daytime chart, then the sun is going to be the loudest planet that is talking through your chart, basically. There are obviously different rules to this, like we were talking about, like what is the chart ruler saying as well. That's true, but you kind of go down the list. So the chart ruler is extremely important. But so actually, this is a good opportunity to actually use someone's chart. Can someone put their chart information in the chat and I can pull your chart up? Because I think that might also help to kind of get some hands-on participation / practice. And I'll continue to, like, talk about this more as we continue while we wait. But so when you have a daytime chart, whatever sign the sun is in is going to be the loudest energy because you have a daytime chart. But what's also going to be the loudest as well, or the supporting characters of the sun, are going to be one benefic, one malefic. And it's the same thing for a nighttime chart. If you were born at night, then your sun is not going to talk as loud as the moon is. It's going to be Venus, or sorry, it's going to be one benefic and one malefic. So for daytime charts, the malefic in your favor, or we'll say within sect, is going to be Saturn, and the benefic that's in your favor or within sect is going to be Jupiter. If you have a nighttime chart, then the moon is talking the loudest, and the supporting planets that are in your favor or within sect are going to be Venus and Mars. So why is this important? It's important mostly not just because of like reading natal charts and gathering a lot of information quickly, but also it's important because of transits. So say you're born at night and you're going through your Saturn return. Unfortunately, your Saturn return might be a bit more difficult because Saturn is out of sect for your natal chart. So Saturn transits are going to be a bit harder for you than somebody that has a daytime chart. But say you have a daytime chart and you're having some sort of Mars transit happening. Mars transits are going to be a bit tougher for you than somebody that has a nighttime chart. And you can even do the same thing, obviously, with benefics. So say like you have a daytime chart and you're having a Venus transit happen, that it might not be as positive, or it can be a bit more minimal than maybe what's expected, than for somebody that has a nighttime chart, and vice versa. Mercury is kind of in the middle. Mercury is influenced more so by the planets it has contacts with. So if, let's say, you have a daytime chart and Saturn is within sect, therefore, and it has contacts with Mercury. Mercury transits are going to be a whole lot easier for you because the supporting planet of your chart is touching on Mercury. But let's say instead of Saturn having contacts with your Mercury, then Venus is having contacts with your Mercury, but you have a daytime chart. Mercury transits are going to be a lot more difficult for you. Okay. Thank you, honey. I will go ahead and pull up your chart. Give me 1 second here. give me a couple seconds, guys, while I pull up this chart. Okay. I think I have to create a new window for this. Okay, so oops, let me zoom out just a little bit. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we have Connie's chart up. So she is a Virgo rising, and she was born at night. So another question that I'll often get is, okay, I was born at like 2 a.m. Technically, that's morning. Would I still be considered a nighttime chart? It depends on if, so a rule of thumb that most astrologers agree on is, was there light outside? Like, was the sun actually showing its light at that time? If it wasn't, then it's considered a nighttime chart, because there will be some charts where the sun is like right underneath the ascendant, or it's like right in the first house. If there was no light out, then you have a nighttime chart. But if it was, then it's a daytime chart. Because of course, like you have like situations like in Alaska, right? That like there's no light for what, like 6 months. Well, maybe Alaska's not a good example, but you would say, is there usually light out at that time wherever you're living at? So like say you're born during like daylight savings time or something, during like at like 6 a.m. If there's light out, then you have a daytime chart, but if not, then it's considered a nighttime chart. So her sun is, or her solar chart is a nighttime chart. It's down here in Scorpio in the 3rd. And so the sun is going to speak to her, I guess, the most in this example. Saturn and Jupiter are going to almost back up what it's supporting the sun. So Saturn transits might be a bit lighter for her. Where is your Saturn at? That's the only thing I don't like about like this website, is the glyphs are so tiny. There it is. It's in Aries in the 8th house. So even if the sun itself in the chart is a nighttime chart, if the benefic and the malefic that are supporting the sun in a daytime chart, if they're above the horizon line, that's fine. They're still considered within sect and they're still doing their job. Same thing for a nighttime chart. Just because the sun is obviously, is down at, or sorry, I mixed that up. So for a nighttime chart, if you have the supporting planets, like Saturn and Jupiter, above the horizon line, they are still within sect. The only planets that are out of sect, because it is a daytime chart, are the Moon, Venus, and Mars. It doesn't matter if the Moon is down in the bottom hemisphere, down here, automatically, because it's a if it were like so let's say it was a daytime chart. Oh my goodness, I am so sorry. I confused myself. So she, sorry, Honey has a nighttime chart, so therefore it would not be the sun, it would be the Moon, Venus, and Mars. There we go. Jesus, Micah. It would be the Moon that would speak to her most. So when we're looking at like what are some key points that we want to look at her chart first to get the most information, you want to look at the Moon, but you also want to look at Venus and Mars, because those are going to speak a bit more loudly to the sun. That's not saying that the sun isn't important in her chart. It's just not going to be as pronounced as the themes of her moon are. So her moon is in Leo. So the moon in Leo in the 12th is going to take more precedence than the sun in Scorpio. They can have very similar themes, honestly, because moon in the 12th is going to lend itself a lot to Sun and Scorpio in the 3rd, coincidentally. But there might be more themes of like maybe being more creative, more dreamy, than being maybe like more like brooding, or just like very much in your thoughts, even though the 12th house is also very introspective as well. But it's like more focused on creativity, and maybe wanting to be alone as well, just like kind of with your art and things like that. And then we need to look at like where Venus is. Venus is also in the 3rd. So we have also a key player in the 3rd with her sun as well. And so even though the sun really isn't talking as loud, Venus is. And so that also kind of ties in themes between the moon and like that whole 3rd house. If you don't mind, Honey, could you tell me, do you do like any kind of creative writing? I'm just interested, like personally.
Yeah, I do. I like writing short stories and drawing.
Okay, cool, cool. I was wondering because I'm like the 3rd house is like, obviously like write some sort of like writing, but the 12th house is like fiction. And so I was wondering if you did like maybe like poetry or like songwriting, because that would also be like a very like moon in Leo moon in the 12th as well. So I think I want to say, is it Demi Lovato who has her moon technically in the 12th if you read it on Placidus, but oh no, she has not moon in the 12th, but there's something in the 12th. And I think it's Mercury in the 12th. Yeah, it's Mercury and Leo in the 12th. And she writes all of her music. If not all of it, then most of it, I think. I do believe I've heard in she does that. But I'm like, the 12th house lends itself to storytelling or like just dreaming up fiction or just being very creative in that way. And because it's already linked through like you being a nighttime chart and Venus being in the 3rd, it can be about writing, like creative writing. So I just wanted to ask. Moving on to Mars. Mars is in the 1st house on the ascendant. And so that Mars in Virgo would also be supporting the moon as well. So it can be a lot of maybe like perfectionism, wanting to make sure that things get done, maybe especially when creating things, being a bit harder on yourself, or being like your own worst critic. But it all kind of comes together. We're constantly like, changing how you express yourself. That can come up too. All of that, I'm just trying to like tie it all together with that 3rd house, since we're seeing like a lot of ties between the third house, the third, the first, and the 12th coming in. But let's say that we were looking at a daytime chart for all intents and purposes with this same chart. Let's say that we had the sun up here in Taurus in the 9th, but we kept the moon sign like the same. So if the sun, hypothetically, were up here in the 9th in Taurus, then the moon, Venus, and Mars are automatically what we call out of sect. They're not helpful. If anything, they have the opposite effect of what they might usually do. So they're just not as helpful. They don't always cause bad things to happen, but it might just either, I won't say nothing will happen if those planets that are out of sect are triggered. It's just like it's either very minimal. So like say like we had a daytime chart and you had like a Venus transit or whatever, like Jupiter going over your Venus, which some people could say like a Jupiter Venus like transit happening could, say like, oh, I won the lottery or something, or like I met the love of my life on a travel trip, or I even actually I think a more fitting interpretation of like a Jupiter Venus transit would be like maybe like I won a all expense cruise. Ideally, if like we were keeping this as like a nighttime chart, that'd be great. Maybe. It really would also depend on what Jupiter was doing, as far as like what else it was touching on. Because Jupiter would be out of sect. But it's because it's touching a benefic that is within sect in her nighttime chart. It really depends. But what I'm trying to get at basically is like if she had a daytime chart, instead of maybe winning an all expense cruise, she gets a day off work. That could be negative because you're obviously not making as much money, but you get time to relax. It could be looked at either way. The other one that we could say is Venus is all about health. And so Jupiter can be like, okay, Jupiter transiting over Venus for a daytime chart because Venus is out of sect could say, I need to focus on health. So I need time away. I need time. So it could be like, I guess at its worst, it could trigger like some sort of illness causing you needing to focus on health and being by yourself. That's an example, but you guys kind of get like the gist of it. It's not ideal. I know there will probably be a lot of questions about sect, and so at any time you guys have any questions, please don't be afraid to let me know. I will definitely we can pull up all the examples and we can talk through this. Let me know because we are going to be getting into aspects. Yeah, sure. Let's see. Okay, give me a second while I pull this up. Or actually, let me go to this. No, I'll stay on this website. Okay. We'll just keep it there. Clarissa, what we have the time and the date, but what's the city and the state? Got it. Okay. Oops. Hold on. Let me. Forgot to put this on whole sign. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that. Oh wait, I've lost the thing. Okay, so okay, so you have a daytime chart. Why can't I? Oh, there we go. Okay, so you have a daytime chart where I think we're a little too zoomed in, but I feel like if I zoom out just a little bit, there we go. Okay, so you have a daytime chart. So the benefic that's within sect is going to be Jupiter. The malefic that's within sect is going to be Saturn. And so Saturn, even though it's malefic, is more helpful in most cases. I mean, it's still going to be Saturn, but it's not going to be as rough. For Saturn transits might be more productive, we could say, than maybe somebody that had a nighttime chart. Saturn might cause a little bit more havoc. And Jupiter transits would be more helpful, or it's more supportive to what the sun is trying to say than someone with a nighttime chart, for instance. So we have sun in Capricorn at 22 degrees in this is technically, oh wait, it's, yeah, I thought I put this in, oh, I did put it in whole sign. I was like, why is this in, so this is going to be in the 9th house, even though I guess it technically like shows the glyph over here and it looks like it's in the 10th house, like the actual line is like drawing it to the 9th house. So we have the sun is more speaking to themes of like belief, freedom, wanting to break out, but the 9th house can also be about like some sort of noble cause that we want to create. Capricorn is all about responsibility. And so if we put that together with Saturn in the 10th, it kind of just like, even though it's in Aquarius, it emphasizes that. It says that I really want to what are the words? Because Saturn in Aquarius is talking about what's best for everybody. So it can be seen as kind of like the social justice kind of warrior character without getting too specific. I think that's also like, as like, I realize I'm going on tangents here, but when reading charts, especially if you don't know the person, I would really stray away from like creating a story. You can be specific without creating some sort of like storyline for the person, because a lot of times your clients will, if you plan on doing this professionally or just doing it for funsies, a lot of times when people will like open up and tell you you're looking to hit the dartboard, not the bullseye. Um, and so there, it's very possible to leave a lot of room for the other person to fill in the gaps. You're just creating the structure from what you're seeing in the chart. So an example of that would be like Sun in the ninth in Capricorn is going to lend itself to um, themes of higher learning, wanting to know basically all the things. I mean, and of course you'll say it in your own way. And that's like, this is just my way of saying, saying it, or just being very open-minded, wanting to excel, and have a very open-minded philosophy or outlook on life. Um, Constantly wanting to learn and achieve and master different ways of thinking or different subjects. Higher learning topics can also be a way that we see that, and wanting to share it with everybody else. Since Saturn is going to be a supporting player here, and it's in the 10th, so it's literally where everybody can see. So it could be about like teaching other people about what you learn. And then the other supporting planet that we have supporting the sun is going to be Jupiter. And where is Jupiter? Jupiter is down here in the 6th. So it's about being of service to other people. So it could be about either being a teacher, it could be about being a spiritual teacher, or being some sort of like guru that wants to help other people learn to think in a way that's more productive and like inclusive of everybody. Maybe that stirs up a little controversy, but is ultimately meant to, even though it might ruffle a couple feathers since it's Saturn in the 10th, it is ultimately, like, ideally what you're trying to maybe create is something that liberates more people. And so that's very specific, but it's not vague. But it's also not like creating like, these like it's not creating like again, like a story for the person. You want to give your clients, room to also be able to talk to you as well. Because you never know what's going on. You don't want to create like a story about someone and they're like, that is not what's happening. That's why. And so yeah, you just kind of give them space to fill in the blanks. And that's fine. I think I've found that most clients appreciate that. But it also just kind of helps with accuracy. Simple is the best way to go. Simple but accurate is the best way to go. And so we talked about Jupiter in the 6th. So Jupiter is about expanding on, but the 6th house can be about conflict. And it's interesting because you have Jupiter in the, so you would think that it's expanding on like conflict, which it could do, especially in the workplace. You might ruffle feathers in the workplace, which again kind of brings me back to like being like kind of like this champion for other people that maybe are looked over, or like communities of people that maybe are looked over more often than not, or people that don't have a voice. But and I say that particularly because it's Jupiter in Libra, so it's about relationships with other people. But it can also be about bringing other people together, since Jupiter is a benefic and it's supporting Sun in the 9th. And so it can be about maybe, yes, ruffling feathers, but ultimately the goal is to bring people together, to start working together, into being of service to other people. So it could be like, one way that we could think about this is like, it's not about the money for you, it's about what came of the work that you put in, and what were the connections what were the connections that you made with others. Libra can be like one-on-one, but I do like that. Obviously the other supporting player is Saturn in Aquarius, which is not just one-on-one, it's about the group. And this is what sets you apart as somebody that maybe is sought after for like knowledge and things like that. So does that make sense on how we kind of tie these things together? because the ninth house is already about belief. Saturn is kind of bringing that in as well. I'd say go for it. If you wanted to be a spiritual teacher, you definitely have the ability. I think Saturn is really pushing more so for the work to be put in and the structure to be created. Let's see. I would say, yeah, right now is probably a great time because the North Node is on your ascendant right now as well. Okay, so we are quickly running out of time, but let's see where we're at. No problem. Let's see where we're at as far as like this worksheet. We can continue because I mean, I think a lot of these we've kind of like talked about already. And we'll just kind of go more in depth and then we'll talk about the homework, and I think that'll be our time. So we should be able to finish this worksheet today, I think. Okay, so let me just share my screen again. Okay, so we talked about sect. So we're gonna just go over some definitions. So benefics are planets that affirm, stabilize, or improve different planets or parts of the chart. Malefics are planets that negate, destabilize, or corrupt different planets or parts of the chart. So Jupiter is going to be the daytime benefic. Venus is going to be the nighttime benefic. The daytime malefic is going to be Saturn. The nighttime malefic is going to be Mars. You could also think of like the day and nighttime planets to be like teams. I think I've described it this way in the past, is that like the sun and moon are like, think of them as like political candidates. You know how like each political like person that's like each politician that's like running for the presidency is like and they have like their VP and then like their campaign manager or whatever, and those two people are like really important because they support the candidate, the main candidate. Think about it that way. So the sun is the main candidate, and you have the Jupiter maybe as the VP, or you can, it's one of those two. And then the malefic is maybe like the campaign manager or something like that. So that would be Saturn in the daytime chart. And you would do the same thing for a nighttime chart. So that's another way to just think about it, if that makes it, if that, I guess, creates like a better picture for you as we continue this. Okay, we have a little bit of a exercise that we can do together. We started a little late, and so if you guys don't mind, then we can go until 7:10. If you have to go, I understand. So these are small. So I'm gonna see, there we go. So I think, oh, let me look at my own question. In the charts above, which would be the nighttime chart? And which one would be the daytime chart? So I'm going to zoom in on this chart first, the one that is a Leo rising. Also, if you have this pulled up already on your own individual screens, and you can look at it as well, but we're looking at the one right here that is a Leo rising with Sun in Leo. Oh, this is actually Demi's chart, Demi Lovato's chart. And so I was talking about this one earlier with the Mercury in 12. But would this be a daytime or a nighttime chart? Keep in mind with this chart in particular, since it's a Placidus one, it's a Placidus house system, just look at where the sun is at. Remember that the ace of the ascendant is where the horizon line starts. And so knowing that, since the sun is right here, would this be a daytime or a nighttime chart? You can type it into the chat box. Okay. Yes, it's a nighttime chart. Thank you, Clarissa and Honey. And then we're just gonna go to this next one. Oops, if I could zoom out. Would this one be the one that's a Taurus rising? Would this be a day or a nighttime chart? Yep, absolutely. It would be a daytime. Okay, so moving on. Oops. So when a planet is in a sign that's that it naturally rules over, so like let's say Venus were in Taurus, it is said that that planet is in its domicile. So basically, it's at home. It's in a planet. It's the planet is in a sign that it naturally rules over. So Venus would be in its domicile in Taurus, but it would also be in its domicile in Libra. Jupiter would be in its domicile in Pisces, but it would also be in its domicile in Sagittarius. Same for Mars being in its domicile in Scorpio and Aries, as well as Mercury being in its domicile in Mercury and in Virgo or Gemini. When a planet is in a sign that's opposite of a sign that it naturally rules over, it's said to be in its exile. So let's just say it's away from home and it's not really happy about it. Let's say it's like at work. So this would be like if Venus were in Scorpio. Scorpio is traditionally a Mars ruled sign. So, and it's also opposite of Taurus, which is where Venus is at home at. This is also, this I will say is important because when you start reading birth charts, this is just good to know because it makes more sense about why somebody with Venus in Scorpio might forget. I think I want to say like let's say like I don't want to say like people with planets in their exile are controversial, but I think like they definitely they ruffle some feathers. Like they just like, especially when like we talk about like societal norms, they usually bump up against that. Like I think like a great example of that is Hillary Clinton. If I'm not mistaken, her Venus is in Scorpio, and she is, I think she's been talked about as being like, I guess like hawkish or just very like not feminine, which is Venus, it's femininity. Or just being too masculine. And this would be the same if like her Venus were in Aries as well. Venus is in a Mars ruled sign. We talked about this a couple weeks ago when we were talking about like the planetary, like how planets interact with each other and how Venus signs will always be opposite Mars signs. So if you have Venus in a sign that is ruled by its opposite planet, then it's in its exile. And you can get just like some turbulence with how that planet, it's hard for the planet to express itself the way it would normally do things. So Venus in Aries or Venus in Scorpio might not be as good at creating harmony as somebody maybe with Venus in Taurus. They, let's say, like with those examples, somebody with Venus and Aries might be a bit more aggressive, where Venus wants to be soft. It wants to be patient. It wants to wait and attract things. Venus and Aries is like, okay, yeah, sure, I want to attract it, but I don't have time for that, so I need to go get it. And so Venus is going to have a hard time doing what it usually does. It's just out of its comfort zone. Hopefully that makes sense. So I guess I kind of like solved like the first question. So it's like, if Mars is in Libra, is it in its domicile or exile? It's in its exile. Why? Because Libra is a Venus ruled sign, and Mars is Mars, and Mars in Libra is in a Venus ruled sign, and so Mars is going to have a hard time doing Mars like things in a Venus ruled sign. So if Jupiter is in Virgo, is it in its domicile or exile, and why? If you want to, you can either come on the mic or you can chat, put it in the chat box.
If I may,
Yeah.
it would be in exile because Virgo is ruled by Mercury.
Yes.
Yes. And why, I do not know. I cannot think that fast to answer that question here.
That's okay. So it would just be an opposite side. It would be like, so Jupiter and Mercury are opposite planetary energies, and Virgo is ruled by Mercury, so that's why. And so Virgo is ruled by Mercury, which Mercury is going to be more about like the small details of things, but Jupiter is a big thing for her. So if you wanted to expand, you could say like, the like nice and short and simple is like it's two opposite planetary energies, but the longer explanation would be Virgo is, because it's ruled by Mercury, it's going to be about smaller details of things. It can be contrary about debate. It can be more into going back and forth, where Jupiter is about a big picture thinker. It's not about the details. And so Jupiter being in a sign that's about the small details, but Jupiter is about the big picture. It can't think about big picture because it's expanding on a sign that's about small details. And so, but I mean, you got the gist of it, I think, with just knowing that yes, it would be in its exile. And of course, also like, we're in class right now, so you guys have time to think about this more, like when we're out of class too. So this was the one that I had actually like already talked about. So if Venus was in Scorpio, is it in its domicile or why? It's in its exile because Venus is in a traditionally Mars ruled sign. So we'll just run through this really quickly with exaltations and debilitations. So domicile and exile is basically I'm at home, I'm away from home. Exaltation is when the planet is not exactly at home, but it's in a sign it does really well in. So like, for example, let me make sure I'm not like ruining actually let's just like read through this, and then we'll talk about examples later. So when a planet is in a sign where mutual significations or concepts are shared or supported, we say that the planet is in its exaltation in that sign, because its natural traits are not only able to express themselves more freely, but they're amplified. When the opposite is true, we say that the planet is in its debilitation. So there, we'll still have to cover this more next time. I'm going to do a review of the exaltation and debilitation when we have our next session together. And what I will say is that it's easiest just to memorize these. I wouldn't say it's like the most important thing in astrology, but I do think it's good to know. Like the more that you read these, like if you read them, like eventually you'll just know them. But it's not the most important thing. But I mean, it's good to know. Because it does, like, this does become its own like little like niche in astrology, because like you can get into like what degrees of each sign are technically exaltations and which ones, I guess, to some people are not. It should be on YouTube. The class before this one should be on YouTube, I think, because Alex said that everything was all uploaded, so it should be on YouTube, Sarah. So we have no problem. So the sun is exalted in Aries and is debilitated in Libra. Really quickly, why? So the sun is about bringing life. It's a luminary. Aries is literally the start of a new zodiac year, or a new year, like as far as the zodiac goes. And so it is literally also about bringing new life into the world. It's where we start off. And so the sun is therefore ample, like sun traits are amplified by Aries because of those two things. I mean, there are other reasons as well, like for instance, that the sun is about like leadership. Aries could also be said it's about leadership. It's literally the first one. But it's debilitated in Libra because Libra is coming at a time of year where it's actually getting colder. It's getting warmer in Aries season. And the sun is obviously literally like warm. It's about light. But you're seeing in Libra season, things are starting to turn brown. In Scorpio season, you see things dying off. So Libra season is literally that pivot point where life starts to die off, so to speak. And that's why I also put those examples about like light and dark when we were talking about the zodiac signs, because of this, because it does come in handy. But if you understand this like on its own without those examples, cool. But Libra season is literally representing a time of year where we see more death than life. And the sun, that's completely opposite of what the sun is trying to relay. So we see the sun debilitated in Libra. Saturn is exalted in Libra. Saturn is literally the planet where we see death and all the not so fun stuff. And where we see coldness, like things just kind of being yucky, and is therefore debilitated in Aries, the sign where we see new beginnings and life coming in. But also remember when we were looking at the Thema Mundi, when we were talking about, I think that was last class. I think it was last class, where we were talking about how do you know the difference, or how how the luminaries are always going to be opposite of Saturn ruled signs. We kind of see that come back into play with exaltations and debilitations as well. The moon is exalted in Taurus, and it is debilitated in Scorpio. The moon is about fertility, so is Taurus. Scorpio is literally about death. It's the same thing kind of going on. Mercury is exalted in Virgo and debilitated in Pisces. Mercury, and so I will say, so why isn't Mercury exalted in Gemini? We want to emphasize the planet's natural strengths. So in Gemini moves really quickly. And so yes, it's doing the Mercury thing, but none of it is structured. Virgo, because it's an earth sign, is going to ground and structure Mercury a bit more. So that's why it's exalted in Virgo. And it's debilitated in Pisces because Pisces is literally the opposite. It's about being, not as, it's literally about not being grounded at all. It's about being in the dream world and being a big picture thinker, a big dreamer. And so Mercury is going to be debilitated in Pisces, but exalted in Virgo. This goes for time of the year as well as when people have it in their natal chart or progress charts or whatever. I will say just like a little blurb about this, like I've had Mercury in Pisces in my progress chart for like the past 2 years, and honestly, I cannot stand it. I constantly have to talk to other people about some of my decisions because I'm like, I'm not the best at making rational decisions during this time. And also we could say because Pisces is a water sign, it's going to be a bit more emotional, so creates more of an emotional thought process than it would in Virgo, which is going to be what are the facts, what's true. Venus is exalted in Pisces. Venus is literally about just feeling good. So with Pisces, it's not really going to question things much. It just wants to create. Also, Venus, if you notice, Venus is also going to be, Venus is exalted in a Jupiter ruled sign. It's exalted in a benefic ruled sign, such as Pisces, which is about feeling all the things, being super dreamy, all those things, and debilitated in Virgo, which is about questioning everything and looking at the smaller details. Mars is exalted in Capricorn, which is a Saturn ruled sign, but it can also be seen as Capricorn is about structure, getting things done. It's about knocking out different tasks. It's about climbing, doing a lot of like work or laborious work that takes a lot of time, exerting a lot of energy, which Mars does naturally. And debilitated in Cancer. Cancer is about all the feelings and all the softer things, where Capricorn is a bit more cold, so to speak. And Cancer is more so about bringing life. It's about family rather than just achieving one's goals. Both Mars and Capricorn are very ambitious planets in Zodiac. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. So it's literally, this is what we we're talking about, how Jupiter was the planet of pregnancy. That's one way that we could look at it as well. But Jupiter is about expansion. Cancer is about security. It's about family. And of course has those ties to pregnancy as well. And it's about bringing life in as well as security. And debilitated in Capricorn. Cancer gives a lot of way to expansion. Capricorn does not, because it's literally about restriction. So if Jupiter is debilitated in Capricorn because it's just expanding on restriction and hard work. So fun, I guess not so fun fact, I guess, Jupiter was in Capricorn when we had quarantine happening in 2020. So I think that's all we have time for today. We can close out with any questions you guys have. If not, then that'll be it for class today.
Do we have homework?
Yes. So I'm sorry. Thank you, honey. I don't think I gave this this homework. I think I actually forgot to give this one, and I wanted to give it today, but let me know if I have already given this one, because I think I forgot to give it in the first class because we ran out of time as well. But so I want you to track the moon at least for a week. If you're feeling ambitious, you can do it until we meet again. I would love to hear you guys' feedback on what you observe. So what you're going to do is you can either look at like any astro website and just look at where the moon is every day. You can keep a journal. You can just keep like an audio like record, just write, or even just like jot down a couple notes about what happened. If you want to go a step further, you can track how the moon is moving through your houses in your chart. So I guess like, so the first thing I'm saying is, okay, say like today the moon is in Sagittarius. What happened today and tomorrow? Because I think it's moving out of Sagittarius tomorrow, but what is happening? What do you observe happening during that time with what you know about Sagittarius, and how can that show up in different ways? Because a lot of times when you see the moon acting out whatever sign it's not usually overt. Sometimes it is. Like literally you could, be very much into your studies during Sagittarius season. You could be attending a class like we are right now. But you could also maybe get into a conversation or either with yourself or someone else about spiritual beliefs, or having to deal with some sort of law paper, like legal paperwork, signing a lease to like a new home, all that kind of legal paperwork and things like it's all Sagittarius stuff. You could be feeling like you want to go on an adventure, so you go on an impromptu like road trip. All that is Sagittarius. So I'm just challenging you to look a little bit closer at your day-to-day life and relate that back to astrology through the moon. Because you'll see when maybe like the moon goes into Scorpio, especially since we're in Gemini season. The moon being in Scorpio, like we just learned, is debilitated. And so people are a bit more moody in Scorpio, like when the moon is in Scorpio, maybe a bit more prickly. And because it's Gemini season, they might be a bit more vocal about it. Conflict might break out a bit more, or the other side of that could be you're just feeling a bit more like you want to talk to a trusted friend, or you're feeling like you want to kind of like isolate to protect yourself from maybe like the opinions of other people or whatever. You could take it a step further by literally looking at, okay, maybe Sagittarius is like your second house. It could be like, okay, the moon is changing, because we also have to remember what the moon stands for is also change as well, not just what's happening in day-to-day life, but in our natal chart. Wherever the moon transit, whatever house the moon transit, is where we see change happening. And so there can be like a fluctuation. If Sagittarius is your second house, then there can be a fluctuation in income if it's like in the second house. And you have to find new ways or expand your budget, or maybe you spent more money than you were supposed to on a purchase during that time. Whereas it may be in Scorpio season, you're dealing with the consequences of overspending. But just kind of keeping either a journal as best as you can, because I know like I myself did struggle with this a lot at first, and I didn't get every day, but just do what you can remember, because I know we're all busy. So even if you can only jot down like a couple of days, just commit to even doing like maybe, if not the whole week, like 3 days, just so you can kind of see the difference and observe things, because that honestly, like, is how you learn astrology, by actually like consciously living it and experiencing it and knowing what's happening in the sky. And the most basic way you can do that is by tracking the moon and just observing. And so that is your homework. Any questions?
Yeah, when you say like when the moon in your chart, do you mean looking at your natal chart, your birth chart, or is because you mentioned a progressive chart too?
Oh yeah, so just your natal chart. We're not looking
Okay.
at progress charts yet.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, if we don't have any more questions, I'm going to end the session. Okay, I will see everybody in a month. I will let Alex know when I have the next date. No problem. Talk to you guys later. how do I